Hello, all, and welcome to Whispers of the Deep. My name is Draken. So, to basically start out, Whispers of the Deep is a long-form fiction project that I've been working on for the past several months. When I started out with this, I essentially wanted to see what would a dark fantasy series look like if I was one to write it. I being someone who's trained in ancient history, archaeology, classical studies, economics, that sort of thing, where in terms of like grand fantasy or epic fantasy written by other people in the past, the profession, training, and so forth of the groups of people or people who write these things bleeds out into the writing. So, for instance, Dune is written by Frank Herbert. Frank Herbert is an ecologist, and it shows. Lord of the Rings is written by Tolkien. Tolkien is a linguist. It shows. Um, uh, Narnia is written by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is a theologian. It shows. Now, am I as good as any of these people? Hell no. But I wanted to see what it would look like if, someone with my types of skills tried writing something. So basically, how this is going to work is to every single one of these analysis videos, there's an accompanying video where I'll go over one of the chapters, and then there will be this video where I go through the chapter more or less and talk about some cool things I like, some things which are fun, some foreshadowing. Nothing terribly spoilery. I don't want to give everything away, but basically, I just wanted to have this as sort of a going over type thing. But because this is the prologue, we're also going to do the epigraphs, and there are two. The first one is an ancient heroic inscription which reads, "A message, a system, attention, what lies underground, and what had happened, important to us, powerful, this place's honor, commemorated here. His value is here." I need to turn off my phone. Um, we believe that we have an obligation to protect future generations. Whom is buried, it increases towards the center below us. His danger is still present in your time. Its form effigy. So essentially, reading this, it seems to be some kind of monition at the tomb of a hero about the evil they slew and how this evil might come again. However, let's just, I don't want to say it outright, but this line is actually, "This place is not honorable. Nothing of value is nothing of value is here. No deeds are esteemed here." Rather, like this place is no place of honor. Nothing good is commemorated here. Nothing of value is here. No deeds are esteemed here. If that means anything to you, good for you. But just like keep that in mind about the themes of the story and things being in the earth, which we don't really know wholly about. The second epigraph is "Malo mala manet nisi fractal refabricataque." Something made from evil remains evil unless broken and remade anew. So "Malo mala malet," it's fun. Um, but the question is like, what is to be made from evil? Is it something that is like evil from inception, something that is turned into evil through the way it's reared or something like that? But that's neither here nor there. Let's get to the prologue. So basically at the beginning of each chapter is going to be a quote from an in-universe text. This one is the Hereticon of Saint Thalea. What a Hereticon is and who Saint Thalea is, well, that's for something to find out in the future. But the quote essentially, "And who do you wish for most?" Ab asked the labyrinth weaver to pious Melanthius from atop her rock. When the son of Heva said it was to be Lord of the Spires, she had this to reply: "Who then will you rule for, the living or those whose deaths have brought you here today?" So this is essentially a question on like what is rulership and what it is to be a ruler. Who Pius Melanthios is, that will be determined later. We'll figure that out later. Who the Labyrinth Weaver is, we'll figure that one out too. But essentially, how this works is we're assuming you've already read the chapter, and now we're going to go through it and basically just talk about some of the fun things. So really do like the punchy openings, but we have this fun thing where it's like the shadows go up down his foot, then his knee, then half his thighs, or you can really feel him being immersed. A large linguistic inspiration for this work is sort of epic poetry and the conventions of epic poetry. As for long summer twilights, there's something later it said that like these long evenings are a bane to spies or something like that. So perhaps something that we'll get into later is that the world the day-night cycle is slightly different than ours, and also there are two moons, which we'll get into later. But so essentially, Hamak goes down beneath the walls of Green Navria to the pit, and he is nervous, and eventually is told that this pit is this underground chasm where there's one prisoner, and because Hamak is a jailer in a city under siege, we get this very vivid description of what the pit looks like, and then we get the story of how Hamak, Ninios, and their boss Malgon find this spy question mark person is, and then we have Malgon say, then you'll be lashed, or we'll starve the truth out of you." But he also gives the option that he's going to take the clay bowl that the prisoner was left with, and they're going to like kill themselves with it, which is bleak in a word. But then we get the description of Corpse Hands and where his name comes from, which is that he has vitiligo on 7 of his 10 fingers. We don't know which fingers exactly are the ones that don't have vitiligo on them, but we'll get to that later. But essentially, the vitiligo marks Corpse Hands as someone of prominence, that there's the gods, whatever gods are in the story, that they have some kind of plan for him. Now, so Hamak is Navrian from the city of Green Navria, with Green and Blue and Red Navria being the 3 capital cities of the kingdom of Navrion. And he mentions 2 gods, Aziz and Orphea. We'll get to them. So here it says, not a problem. The Northern pigs haven't a chance to breach our walls, but King Horn messes us in the field. So essentially, this tells us essentially what the scene, which at Green Navria is under siege. The king of Green Navria, Hormizdas, named after, I believe, a Pontic king from ancient Roman history, Hormizdas, is that he's in the field, and so they'll be able to sort of do a pincer movement on the Norian camp, in order to break the siege. And if that doesn't work, the allies of Hormizdas, Emperor Pharnaces, named after Hormizdas is an Armenian king. Pharnaces is a Pontic one, or the other way around. Um, we'll get to that, but essentially, here we get the introduction of the Norian pigs, or the Norian Empire. However, as you'll learn in later chapters, the name isn't actually the Norian Empire, that it is the Empire in Noria, which comes into play later. So Hamak so he says, "Isn't that right?" Hamak says, "I sure hope so," because Hamak's mind is on other places. He doesn't have a lot of, as we know from later in the chapter, he doesn't really have a lot of belief in that the siege is going to go the way it should. Hamak asks if Corpse Hands is ready to talk. Corpse Hands doesn't say anything. We get the introduction of they're running out of time. Corpse Hands needs to give a confession so Hamak can like have something to show for. Also, Hamak, although he's a jailer, which is like not a good position, especially he's like his boss is really cruel. Hamak doesn't seem to be a bad person, namely that the line is the wall of iron bars and the power of evil men. Hamak seems to be a morally neutral character, or morally good character. He also calls him my friend, which seems to be an inflection of the language, which is something that Magon uses also. Um, uh, So here we have Corpse Hand shifting around his seat. He appears to be laughing. This will come back later. And then there are 2 moons. There's the Porphyry moon and the Alabaster moon, a red moon and a white moon. And they have different levels of light, and they seem to be the crescent Porphyry moon and the gibbous Alabaster moon. We know that the moons, therefore, are on most likely different time schedules, which actually will come up later in one of the future chapters. So finally, we get Hamak asking, "Who are you, really?" And then he says, "A man of no consequence." And here we enter a section of the chapter which is essentially more like a Socratic dialogue with, well, if you read the Socratic dialogues, there's Socrates, who is always right. And then there's usually 2 or 3 other people. One of them is like half right, one of them is like a fourth right, and one of them is always, always wrong. Corpse Hands is Socrates. Hamak isn't. And the next section of the chapter is essentially Corpse Hands running rhetorical circles around Hamak. So we have this whole thing about how old he is, and then my name is of no consequence. 1,000 kingdoms could rise and fall without some of my sword being again, which is actually I am of incredibly great consequence because if there's say like 10,000 people in a kingdom, 1,000 kingdoms, 10,000. It's like 1,000 kingdoms. If the kingdom lasts for even 100 years, 10,000 people in the kingdom, 50,000 people, something like that. We're talking about millions and millions of people being born, living, and died who are not Corpse Hands. So Corpse Hands thinks he is one of millions or something like that. And then Halleck naturally says that doesn't make any sense because how could you say that you are unlike millions of people and yet you are no consequence? So here we have this interesting idea like where does no this interesting Socratic idea like where does notoriety come from? And Corpse Hands idea is that notoriety comes from being remembered, and that if no one remembers your name, then basically Pixar didn't happen. If no one remembers your name in the future, you yourself as an individual and your deeds aren't as important. So here we have like the metaphor of sculptors, which is a sort of a mirroring of Socratic ideas where characters in the dialogues often use metaphors of very like tactile things like surgery or medicine or music or oratory or things like that, like very like concrete professions. And here we have this the metaphor of the sculptor, which is that the sculptor is important because his works persist, but if he died, then other sculptors would take his place. So the sculptor only mattered because of their actions. So it's not just a combination of being remembered, it's being remembered for something important you did. And also here, we have by the grace of Orfea and our rightful king. So we also learned that the Norian Empire is sieging Green Navria. Hormizdas is the king of Navria. He's considered the rightful king by the Navrians, which means he's probably not considered the rightful king by the Norians. So the Norians are most likely sieging Green Navria to install a person as ruler that they want to be ruler. And the people in Green Navria don't want that. And Green Navia Jewel, the River Emervid. A green jewel is most likely an emerald, and the color of Green Navia is green, and emeralds are green. So it's fun. It's fun. And second daughter of Navrion's Fields, we hear of red and blue Navria later, so most likely blue then green or red then green then blue. That's the order of the foundings of the city. So down here we have seventh capture of Green Navria, and he says, by the grace of Orfea, I hope I won't live to see the eighth, which, spoiler alert, Hamak dies at the end of the chapter, so no, he does not get to see the eighth taking of Green Navria, fortunately. As for who Orfea is, Orfea, as we learn later, is the goddess of dusk, dawn, justice, that sort of thing. She's like this sort of goddess of balance, and Orfea is Orpheus. It's a name taken from the ancient world. However, Orpheus, the Orphics, or the ancient cult, do have the sort of idea of balance and rebirth, which is similar to like Orphea's guise of dusk and dawn and justice. But that's neither quite here nor there. One of the main policies with the gods is the gods are very archetypal, and aren't trying to be like any one god in particular from any polytheistic pantheon. So here we have the metaphor of the sculptors, and then when Hamak says certainly yes in Greek, malista certainly yes, which is just Hamak completely conceding the rhetorical field to Corpse Hands, and Corpse Hands just goes on and on and on. Um, it should go without saying that I'm not going to cover everything in these chapters, but we'll deal with that later. So, but here we have 100 sculptors who are ready to outdo them, I guess so. And then time to or statue would be forgotten, yes. So then you would say someone is of consequence, no matter how the skill, only if they are recognized. And this is very twisted logic, even from what Corpse Hands is saying. And then Hamak cuts in and says, where are you going with this? Because Hamak kind of gets that Corpse Hands isn't really like speaking truthfully about everything, but he doesn't really get it yet. So that Corpse Hands is smarter than Hamak, and Hamak is not smart enough terribly to realize this. Hamak is intelligent, but Corpse Hands is more. So here we have the red gold glow of true orichalcum, like being like the divine light inside Corpse Hands' eyes, which is interesting because red gold or the color the symbolism of gold or like a gold circle is very important and it actually comes back later in the chapter and will be a recurring motif throughout the work. As for orichalcum, so will be introduced in future chapters, but orichalcum for now, just know that it's a special metal, and orichalcum, red gold orichalcum, is in Plato what the walls of Atlantis are built out of. So ancient grandeur. And Corpse Hands then gets Kamak to spill the beans about about the siege above, and then there's the whole thing about pharmacies and things like that. Then we hear more about Tychon Otho, that he's a coward, but also he's a shrewd man. And here we have some little joke. Let them try the summer evening is a bane despised. Corpse Hand's eyes scan the wall of the pit, so I've gathered, because he's imprisoned. Of course he gathers it. And then he's like, so then Hammock jumps at that, Corpse Hands completely deflects it. And Corpse Hand's speech is described as thunder. This will come into play later in the chapter. Hammock lies, Corpse Hand sees immediately through the lie. And then Corpse Hand asks Hammock about his love life. And Hammock just doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut, it seems. So he's like, yeah, I'm in love with this girl, and like she's great, and like she likes me back. And Corpse Hand's like, neat, but nothing really beyond that. And then he says, I made a promise I can't keep it. And we basically continue down like that. So here with the vitiligo stained fingers, which is like the symbol of Corpse power. And if I remember, Corpse shift around his seat again. So he's actually laughing because we established already that Hammock, when Corpse Hands moves around his seat, Hammock thinks he's laughing. So Corpse Hands is like laughing at Hammock, basically. Let's see. So here we have the introduction of the sewer passageway, which is actually like a thing. Rivers shift over time, and if you have a waterway which connects a river to the city and the river shifts, you now have an abandoned tunnel, which there are actually like there are several instances in ancient histories, where sieges are lifted because they find an abandoned waterway going into the city under the walls. So it's a thing that does happen a non-zero number of times, and it might come into play later for the breaking of the siege. So Corpse Hand says, I came to the city looking for a rare scroll in the royal library. Is this true? Who is to say? Corpse Hands isn't very forthcoming about a lot of things, and I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't telling the truth. So you're no spy then, as somebody who sells profit for money, secrets of profit? No, but notice that Corpse Hands supplies his own definition of a spy and says, I am not that, which means Corpse Hands still might be the definition of a spy according to someone else. We just don't know. So Hammock's like, I'll let you out. Hammock found the keys in his hand. He's been holding the keys this whole time. He just forgot because Corpse Hands was that enthralling. Let's flee the cities. Corpse Hands chuckled. What a fine turnkey you would make then. Which is, so this is a double entendre. Corpse Hands is saying, what a fine turnkey you'd make then. Like, you'd be a good turnkey, like a good person who is a turnkey, or a turnkey who is a good person, because you'd let me out. But he's also saying, you'd make an absolutely terrible turnkey if you let me out while I'm your prisoner. So it's a fun little double entendre joke, and it goes completely over Hammock's head. The Hammock does not realize that Corpse Hands is insulting him to his face. But here we have a brave man, your Hammock. One question though, how does he know his name's Hammock? Well, if you actually go back to the beginning, we have let's see, where is it? Here. Not a problem. Isn't that right? Hammock. So 4 days ago, Corpse Hands overheard Magon call Hammock Hammock and has kept that in his mind since then. So basically Hammock has been memorized. Corpse Hands memorized Hammock's face, remembered his name was Hammock, and has been sitting on the information for 4 days. And now we'll get to where we are. So he's like, yeah, it's not going to go well. Hammock is in complete denial. But so essentially, Corpse Hand's like, yeah, some stones over there, and he does, and then Corpse Hen says, I did, Hamak. And then again, Hamak doesn't realize that Corpse Hen's he doesn't question how Corpse Hens knows his name. He will in a bit, but not right now. The lamplight of some great beast, the association of the beast's darkness, gold. Oh, it will come later. Also, this should go without. Well, actually, no, this won't go without saying. But so, Corpse Hands is a well-spoken, kind of mystically coded guy languishing in a prison by himself. So there is one. There are multiple different franchises or intellectual properties or things I've read in the past which inspire Whispers of the Deep in one way or another. However, and sometimes they will become more apparent than otherwise, but Corpse Hands as being a prisoner in a cell by himself might evoke some things, but for a more mainstream evocation, Joseph, who is imprisoned and then rises through the court to become the vizier of Pharaoh. And here we have Corpse Hands, who is this well-spoken, mystically coded man in prison. It would be a bit much if I gave him a Technicolor dream coat, but the point is there is this idea that Corpse Hands is this mystical figure, this is incredibly charismatic mystical figure who is currently trapped in a dungeon, but he might get out. And if he gets out, something might happen. So here we have the Porphyry Moon, gold discs, the association of gold, the association of Mizdas, the association of gold with Corpse Hands, that will be important. And Humber says you have Aziz's own wit. So this is a little reference where Aziz is um let's just say he's a Instagram influencer who died young and pioneered a lot of fitness influencing as like a social media thing as we know it today. And Aziz is in the religion of the Navarreans as a dead god of beauty and strength. So it is a fun reference, and I wanted to put it in. But also there's this motif of Hamak, Aziz, Magon, or Mizdas Farnaces. These aren't traditional Western European fantastic names. And one of the running things of the series is that this is a Mediterranean inspired, like an ancient Mediterranean inspired fantasy world. And we have names from all over the ancient Mediterranean and beyond. And I did not want to write Western European fantasy novel number 12,361. So here we are. So he says, I am Norian, which is spooky. But we have the smell of death, deeper, dank, dark, dreadful. It is, and then death. So it's I like my alliteration. It shows up occasionally. Wait, the tunnel runs north. So we have this little puzzling out, and then he has this idea that Corpse Hands is free and stalking behind him. So it's he imagines Hamak is walking, and then Corpse Hands is walking right behind him, mirroring his exact movements. It's dumb, but it's cute but dumb, but it's fun. And a lot of things the story Whispers the Deep takes itself fairly seriously, but occasionally there has to be some humor where it's if you think about it, it's kind of silly because we like the silliness. So Hamak thinks to go to the left or right, he tries going left and then goes right. This might be a metaphor for something. And then he immediately falls into a pit and the ground collapses beneath him. So don't go to the right if you don't want to fall in pits. And then here we have his fingers find purchase, not found purchase, find purchase. This is a poetic device called the historical present, where basically if you're writing in past tense, you occasionally break into present tense to increase the vividity of the moment. And this is actually a writing technique which will show up repeatedly over and over during the work. So he thinks himself dead. His leg's broken. He's not going anywhere. He could die down there. And then he prays to Orphea. And then he sees no four-winged angel. Yeah, angels in this world have four wings. It's fun. But essentially he sees a portal within stone, surrounded by stone, inky blackness with a single gold dot. And this motif of gold on black with like a gold dot on black is going to be a recurring motif of these portals and how they are everywhere, metaphorically. In fact, earlier in the chapter, Hamuk goes through a portal where it says up here, Hamuk's not up here, but yes, through the portal. So he's going through the portal with the yellow lamp, which is the same color motif. And this should key you into start looking for this motif everywhere, because you will start finding it everywhere. And it is evocative of this portal that Hamak goes through, where he crawls towards it, and there's a sort of skin-like texture of the stone, and then he bleeds out into this world of dream. So it's like things aren't exactly real, and now with this incredibly vivid underground scene with these columns shooting up into the sky, and then we have the columns and the landscape, and we discover that later that there are thousands and thousands of like petrified human bodies in the columns, which is like really spooky. um, uh, and then there's like, and it's like this vast underground sea. It's like the Sea of Chaos in ancient Egyptian mythology. And there's a throne, and then there's this the map of the world with columns, the pillars of the earth rising up, and then look, and then from on high, floating in the air, or maybe not floating in the air, there's this arch of couches with basically the gods sitting on them, and their gods, their voices are the voices of natural disaster, and like the power, the force of the natural world. And actually, this scene of like the gods on an arch of couches is taken from the works of the Emperor Julian II, the Caesars, namely, where it has this motif. It's like this motif of divinity and different tiers of this divinity, this incredibly hierarchical world system, and the wafting of this censer and purple down upon this person in the world, the gods making manifest their ability from the world of heaven to the world of reality, from the world of forms to the world of the present, and it is spooky. And then Hamuk sees this prince of beasts, if you would, with this, who like an Egyptian god has his face changing from an eagle and a dragon, and a hawk, a dragon, and a savage Build-A-Bear. Build-A-Bear, giant bears without hair on their bodies. Why they exist? We'll figure it out eventually. But Hanukkah then gets lifted up into the air by these eyes, and then he gets pushed into one of these columns, and in the columns he recognizes the face of his queen, the queen of Green Navria, the wife of the usurper, or maybe the rightful ruler of Green Navria. We don't know yet. But and then he sees the last thing he sees is the person who is on the ground standing up and bowing towards this monster. What was all that? I don't want to say, but the gods exist, it seems, and the gods are inside the portals, and the gods want to rule, and the gods take people and convert them into their followers, and for those who don't work, they become one with the world that the gods are creating. It's spooky. We'll figure out what it means exactly, but we have this Prince of Beasts looking over all of it. And that's basically the end of the prologue. And again, around here, we have the breaking into a historical present again, which is a lot of fun. But then that's basically all for right now. More videos to come, and thank you for watching. Take care.